I'm just a local liberal nerd, but it's not a stretch to say comic books are one of the hardest media types to get into. Books, pick up a standalone or start at book one of a series. Film and TV, pick one from the sea of them on any of the streaming services and press play. Manga, start at volume 1. Comic books, start at issue 1. Not that issue 1, this issue 1. Actually, no, wait, my bad. Start at issue 125. Not that one. This one. Wait, where you go? If you've never touched a comic as a superhero enjoyer or not, you're doing your life a huge disservice because comics are one of the most compelling artistic mediums out there, and more than just superheroes. So, how do you get into comics in 2025? Before I get into things, I'm going to define a few words. When you walk into a comic book store, you will find comics in one of 4 forms. The first is single issues or floppies. This is the entry point that you will see the most of, either with the new hotness on the shelves or back issue boxes. Floppies also usually have a handful of different covers for the same book, but the guts of the book is always the same. A variation of floppies are zines, a small circulation self-published indie comic or art book that are made of paper and reproduced with a photocopier. Next, we have the trade paperback / hardcover, or commonly known as a graphic novel. These collections consist of one story, whether it's an arc in a creative run or a complete miniseries. If floppies are a chapter in a book, this is the book. Finally, we have the omnibus or compendiums. If I'm continuing my metaphor from earlier, these massive, pretty, pricey hardcovers are whole series box sets, or quarter if it's a really long run. I'm going to start this discussion with print comics, which you can get either at comic book stores or online marketplaces. But most of what I have to say about getting into those also applies to digital comics when I get to that later. And while I also acknowledge the existence of webcomics as something you can go looking for, I won't be discussing them in this video as the only experience I have with them is reading 2/3 of Lore Olympus. Leave me alone. With context out of the way, I imagine a chunk of you are here to get into superhero comics or picture superheroes when you think of comics. If you're looking to get into Marvel or DC, now is the most accessible time to get into them in the past 5 years. The big two are doing fresh start Elseworld universes. Marvel started a brand new Ultimate Universe last year. The first Ultimate Universe from the 2000s is how we got Miles Morales. And this one, like the original, there's a fresh twist on all the characters you know and love. Using Spider-Man as the example, Peter Parker is married to Mary Jane with kids and then gets his Spider-Man powers. Or instead of Wolverine being Weapon X, he's the Winter Soldier under a Russian regime led by Colossus and Magic. They even made it easier to spot these in stores since the standard floppy covers in the trade paperbacks on these all-new Ultimate comics have this white bar with Ultimate in all black caps. Since it's been a year since the start of this new Ultimate Universe, you probably won't be able to find any of the first issue floppies from the inaugural titles on shelves or at retail price. However, it's been just long enough for the first and second volume trade paperbacks of each of them to release. So just start with those and then pick up the floppies from there. However, Ultimate Wolverine began in January 2025. So you shouldn't have any problem finding the floppies for those. While Marvel recommends reading the Ultimate Invasion event and Ultimate Universe one-shot before diving into the new Ultimate Universe, you only really need to read those if you plan on reading the Ultimates, the Avengers-esque book, if you care about how this new Ultimate Universe came to be, or if you're here from Marvel Rivals and really want to understand who the maker is. I hopped into Ultimate Spider-Man, Wolverine, and X-Men issue 1 without touching these, and I understood what was going on. On the other side of the pond, DC kicked off its All-In initiative in October 2024. Which tries to entice new readers into their books at 2 angles. The first is that all the mainline DC comics that came out in October either got new creative teams or started fresh story arcs, so you could hop in to whatever book you wanted to, no problem. Similarly to the new Ultimate Universe, these first jumping on point issues have a unifying standard cover aesthetic, with the titular character floating in some sort of white void in front of their logo. While the trades for most of these jump on arcs will be out this summer, if you want to hop on now, you shouldn't have too much of a problem finding any of these on shelves currently. Just look for the white void logo covers. But if you thought everything I said about Marvel's Ultimate Universe was more attractive, good news. Like I said earlier, DC is more or less doing the same thing with their Absolute Universe. The Absolute Universe reimagines DC's classic heroes by stripping their core elements while keeping their moral cores intact. Using the 3 Absolute comics out right now as examples, Batman doesn't have the money and resources, Wonder Woman doesn't have the Amazons of Paradise Island, and Superman doesn't have the Kents or the Fortress of Solitude. With the first issues for Absolute Green Lantern, Flash, and Martian Manhunter releasing at the end of March, early April this year. If you're interested in any of the Absolute comics out at the time of recording, you should be able to find the first few issues in stores or online. Just don't expect to find the original first printings for Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman. What do I mean by that? When the first issue of the Trinity Absolute comics were released in October, they sold out almost immediately, and it was impossible to find the first printing at MSRP. But don't pay markups, because DC has been reprinting these like it's been going out of style, so anyone interested can get their hands on them. Each new printing has a different cover to differentiate them. As of recording, DC just released the 3rd, 4th, and 5th printings respectively for the first issues of Absolute Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman. They look like this. If you do somehow manage to find any of the first printings at MSRP, snatch them up. But otherwise, pick to taste, not to profit. If you're watching this later in the year or would prefer to wait for the trade paperbacks, the first volumes of Absolute Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman are out towards the end of summer. Just start at issue or volume 1 and you're good to go. While similar to the Ultimate Universe, there's an all-in prelude special for the Absolute Universe. You can skip that. I started at issue 1 with Absolute Batman and Wonder Woman and understood everything going on. In addition to the All-In initiative, DC has also been releasing these compact comic books, which, if you ask me, are one of the best values in all of comics right now. Each of these tiny $10 books is packed with complete story arcs that are on average $40 worth of comics. Less than $1 per issue. And these aren't bargain bin filler stories either, but classics like Watchmen, Batman Court of the Owls, Trial of the Catwoman, and American Vampire. If you've got the allowance for one thing to dip your toes into comics, buy one of these. I personally recommend Batman Court of the Owls. You can find them just about anywhere that sells books. If you can find them on sale, even better. Marvel just started their own line of these called the Premier Collection, but they're $15 rather than $10, so I'm less high on these. But I've been seeing some of them on sale for around $12, which is more in line with compact comics. At that point, it's up to whatever interests you. So that's Marvel and DC superheroes out of the way. But what if you want to explore superheroes outside of the big two? What if you aren't interested in superheroes at all, but want to get into comics? Well, Marvel and DC aren't the only comic games in town. Image, Boom, Dynamite, IDW, Dark Horse, Aftershock, Distillery. These companies are where comics like Invincible and The Boys came from. But that's not all they do. Fantasy, romance, sci-fi, horror, meta, comedy, raunchy, more superheroes. If it exists, there's a comic for it. Also, all of the comics I'm projecting on screen currently are phenomenal stories and starting points. If I had an hour, I'd pitch each and every one of these to you, but in the name of keeping this video as brief as possible, I'm just going to leave these blurbs here, and if any of those blurbs look interesting, just pause the video and give these a Google search. The best part, you start at number 1 and go from there. Or if it's just a limited or mini series, pick up the book and you're good. In the case of Image, they just put out these free little catch-up books for some of their ongoing titles to pass out at comic book stores for titles like Radiant Black and Kaya that summarize everything up to the issues coming out in February. If you want to go back and read the rest of the series, great. But these give you everything you need to hop into the newest issues, no problem. So, you've got a mental list of comics that sound interesting, but you can't find a comic book store within a 30-minute radius, or the cost to get floppies shipped to you is almost as much as the price of the comic. Or you don't have the space to store a couple of short boxes or a small bookshelf. That's fair. While I believe the best way to experience comics is by supporting your local comic book store, let's be honest. The comic book industry isn't in the best place right now. And no, before someone inevitably comments, it isn't because comics have gone woke or injected too much DEI. If that is your viewpoint, I recommend you go outside and touch some grass. If anything, that kind of anger and hostility is part of what makes comics hard to get into for a lot of people in the first place. In actuality, comics aren't sold on spinner racks at newsstands or grocery stores anymore. A lot of comic book stores closed during COVID, making them harder to find, and comics are more expensive than ever, with $4.99 becoming the standard price for a single issue in a time when everyone's dollars are stretched thin. But we're in the year 2025, so you can do just about anything as long as you have an internet connection, including reading comic books. There are 2 ways to go about this. Technically 3, because piracy exists, but obviously don't pirate media. You're not sticking it to the corporations, you're sticking it to the creators who make the art you love. The first legitimate method of reading comics virtually is to flat out buy them on virtual marketplaces and read them on an app like Comixology or download them to an e-reader. This is best if you want to experience new comics fresh off the e-presses. However, if you don't mind waiting or you've got a huge backlog of older comics you want to get through, then I suggest streaming services. Now, I know the word streaming makes most people break out in hives, but they're so prevalent for a reason. Like any other streaming service, you pay a monthly fee to access a large content library. In this case, comic books. You've obviously got ones for Marvel and DC with Marvel Unlimited and DC Universe Infinite. You can read about anything you can think of in their massive backlist catalogs, and new comics becoming available 3 months after their print date for Marvel Unlimited, and 6 for DC Universe Infinite, 1 if you go with the Ultra Yearly plan. If you don't mind the wait and not owning the comics, or mainly plan on reading older comics, this is the way to go. If you're thinking Marvel Unlimited, they usually have solid deals around major film releases in San Diego and New York Comic Con. For example, you can usually get a year for about $30 to $39 instead of the usual $70. In the rare case that you're at the con in person, they usually throw in a limited edition comic or action figure that you can sell to make up the membership cost. That's what I did anyway when I worked at San Diego Comic-Con this past year, and I've been making my Marvel Unlimited work for me, especially since a lot of the new Ultimate Universe stuff has become available on it. Additionally, there's Comixology Unlimited and Global Comics. Comixology Unlimited has a rotating library that covers almost every publisher imaginable, while Global Comics Gold almost solely focuses on indie comics. An added perk of Comixology Unlimited is a discount on digital purchases. It's best if you're trying to build up a digital library and dip your toes into a bit of everything. Again, these are streaming services, and like a gym membership, the personal value you get out of it depends on how much you put into it. Before I wrap up and send you on your comic book journey, here are some words of wisdom. Start small with a title or two and then expand from there. Avoid big events at first. It's easy to overwhelm yourself, and for every King in Black, there are 3 Night Terrors. If what you're reading has a tie-in issue to a major event or leads into one that catches your attention, use that as your gateway. If you're going down the physical route, set up a pull list with your local comic book store. A pull list is a running pre-order where you promise to buy copies of the newest issues of a given comic as they release, and the store promises to set a copy aside so you'll be guaranteed one. A mistake I've made too many times is not pulling the series I like, and then out of nowhere an issue in that comic randomly becomes a key and it sells out and spikes on the secondary market before I can get a copy. Sure, if it sells out, I can just read it virtually, but if you're a physical collector, that gap in your collection hurts at a primal level. Most comic book stores usually have some sort of discount as an incentive to have a pull list with them. My local shop, Nuclear Comics, does a 25% off pull listed books. With my current pull list, this saves me about $12.72 a month. If at any point you want to take a comic off your pull list, give your local comic book store about a month ahead of whatever issue you want to stop at due to how store ordering works. League of Comic Book Geeks is a great website to track what comics are coming out each week as well as their variants. Free Comic Book Day is the first Saturday of every May. Never be afraid to ask a comic book store worker for help and recommendations. Lastly, if you take something from this video, take this. Follow creators, not characters. Pay attention to the writers and artists of the comics you enjoy, because if you loved how they handled one of your favorite characters, chances are you'll at least like how they put that same amount of care into another character or story. Best case scenario is that you find a new favorite. And that's how you get into comic books in 2025. If anything in this video was of use to you, I would appreciate it if you liked the video or subscribe to the channel. It lets me know what resonates with people and what kind of content I should make more of. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.